Hello, I'm Catherine. Welcome back to my studio. In my last video, you might have seen that I made these cards, which has gone down very well, that technique. And continuing the holiday theme, I'm going to show you how I made this gorgeous wrapping paper with ferns. Again, it's quite a simple, straightforward method. I don't want to spend a lot of time on wrapping paper. I'm hoping they're going to get recycled a few times, but you don't want to spend hours over them. And I also made these gift tags to go with them, and I did some more of the foil method to make ferns because I am fern mad, and there's even a word for that, pteridomania. If you're the same as me, so you can make lots of beautiful prints, and I'll go through the different methods that I used. I've been exploring more eco-friendly paints recently because acrylics, which I use mostly, do have plastics in them. And these ones, they're described as eco. They come from a company called Colourcraft, and their claims are they have no solvents, no VOCs, no heavy metals. But I don't think regular acrylic paints have them in anyway, so I couldn't actually see a full ingredient list. So I do have my suspicions that they're not quite as eco-friendly as they claim. But I think they're thin consistency in the ones I normally use. So I think if I make paper with these paints, I'd be happy for them to go into recycling, which I wouldn't when I use just regular acrylic paints. I'll put links below. It's not affiliate or anything, but if you're interested, and if you can find out more about them than me, I'd be interested. And the paper I'm going to use is brown, just simple brown paper that you get on a roll. This is quite a thin one that I like. I use it for wrapping my flowers in. And it's got a nice texture and it takes the paint well, but it's still quite thin, which makes it actually thinner paper. The thinner the paper is, I find it easier to wrap with. That sort of very glossy, thick paper is quite troublesome. And the reason I decided to use ferns, apart from the fact that I love them, is that they're quite big and they'll cover the paper easily. And I decided I wasn't going to cover the whole paper, but just the place in the middle that you'd see first when you wrap the present. I thought that would be sufficient. And this fern is one of my favourites, the copper shield fern, partly because it produces such lovely shapes, but also it's semi-evergreen, so you can carry on picking it through the winter for printing purposes. Also, it's beautiful in the garden because as the leaves emerge, they are this sort of coppery colour, so you get sort of variation in colours on the same plant. So it's an absolutely gorgeous fern. I have done quite a lot of practice with these paints on some scrap paper, and I found, as I say, it's a thinner consistency and it works best if you roll it out very thinly. You get the best print from that. The metallics are a little bit temperamental, so I'll get onto those in a minute, but I'm just using a plain Payne's grey for the first pull. And you can see I'm using just a little, and I'll use my roller to get a really nice even layer onto my jelly plate. So I've laid my brown paper over to get the print pretty much in the middle, and you can see that I'm taping it down just so that I can register it, so that when I put the paper down again, it's going to be in pretty much the same place. And because this paper is very thin, you do have to be careful that you don't get too many air bubbles. That is one of the drawbacks, but you just have to be careful. Another thing you can do, as well as tape it down, I sometimes try and get it right to the edge of the jelly plate, but it's still sort of stuck to it. And then you know that when you put it down again, it's going to be in just the right place. That's why I'm being quite careful with this bit here. So all I do then is take the leaf off and then wait for it to dry, which is very quick because it's such a thin layer. And I'm using the dark gold paint for this. As I say, it was very temperamental. Sometimes it would go quite blobby on the plate, but this time I think it went quite evenly. It seemed to depend. If I'd used the plate several times first, it seemed to behave better. So I think it really reacts if there's any sort of extra moisture on the plate from when I've cleaned it, perhaps. but, I'm being very careful, and because it is this sort of slightly runnier consistency, you do have a little bit more playtime than, thicker paints. So I can just take my time over this and make sure I've got a nice even layer. And then I'm going to place the paper carefully back down, and then I won't show you this bit, but I do wait at least 5 minutes before I take the print off, just to make sure that the 2 layers will dry together and it will come off in a nice clean print. And this is after the 5 minutes. And again, because you've got this very thin paper, you do have to be quite careful as you peel it off. You can see that I'm really pulling it back on itself rather than pulling it up. And that way you'll prevent any tears. I don't think I got any tears in this session. So it is thin but quite strong at the same time. And I actually really like this effect. It's quite subtle, but I think it's really beautifully captured all the laciness of the fern, which is why they're so fun to print with. I'm going to do the same process now, but using different colours. I slightly regret in my paint choice that I didn't choose any really dark colours. The red is probably the darkest I've got, because prints usually look best if you've got some kind of tonal contrast in the paints you're using. But I get round that. You'll see that a little bit later. So doing exactly the same thing, getting a nice even layer on the plate. And for this one, I think I used the slightly paler gold. I got two, a sort of regular gold and kind of an antique gold. What I really like about these metallic paints is they just give a sheen. They're not sort of really in your face glittery or anything. They've got a very sort of small, I think they might use mica or something to create that iridescent look. And you do get these really beautifully subtle effects. So a good tip here is if you put your second layer of paint on and you can still see your first image through, that's perfect. That means you've got just the right amount of paint. And you also want to do quite a lot of rubbing, both with the first pass when you've got the leaf down, so as much of the detail of the leaf goes into the paint as possible. And it's always a good idea to put the more textured side. Some of these ferns have even got spores in them that you can see. If you put that side down on your plate and rub, then you'll get a good impression. And with this second pass, you want to get as much contact again all over the plate. So I always spend a while doing that. And without showing you, I've left it for 5 minutes and doing the very careful peeling back. And I think this one's come out really beautifully as well. I think you should, I might show you some of the practice. Some of the practice ones didn't turn out well. So if you've got a new paint, it's a really good tip to just sort of have a bit of a play with it, because every paint behaves differently, I found, and even within the same range, if an iridescent paint in one range can work differently from a plain paint in that range. So always do a little bit of play and experiment first. And I'm using a different fern. This is the soft shield fern. It can be a little bit tricky to print with because it's got very light leaves and it's quite hard to get full contact with them, but they're beautifully lacy. It's almost like a sort of doily. So I do like to use those ones. And again, they're a kind what they call semi-evergreen. So it will keep especially in a mildish winter, it will keep a lot of its leaves over the winter. So that just gives you more material to print with. So I'm all for the evergreen ferns. And I'm now using turquoise, and if you've seen any of my work or any of my other videos, you'll know that this is a colour I return to a lot as it's one of my favourites. And you can see I'm using a very thin layer and being careful to get a good even layer. And taking some care to rub really firmly to try and get as much of that beautiful detail into the paint as possible. And using your fingers is really the best way, and it helps you to smooth the paper out so you avoid air bubbles, because anywhere you get an air bubble, it's not going to make contact with the plate, and you can get those sort of streaky lines. Sometimes that doesn't matter in something more abstract. Also, might colour them in with pencil afterwards if they bother me, but the more time you take to do it now, the more you'll avoid those problems. So pulling the paper back very carefully. It leaves a little bit on the plate, but that's fine because that's going to come off when I do the next pass with the second layer of paint. And just out of shot, I'm taping it down with the masking tape so it stays in position. But as I say, I do try and leave just the very edge of the paper still stuck to the plate. And then I know, oh, I don't think I quite managed it in that case, as you can see. So it's quite hard to see because it's a pale colour, but it has got lots of lovely lacy detail. And I'm using the silver paint. I think they had several different shades. Again, I think was described as a sort of antique silver, but I got a regular silver, and holding them together, you couldn't really tell that much of a difference between them. And that one's come out quite prettily as well, I think. So I hope you'll agree this is quite a quick process, which, as I say, you don't want to spend a lot of time on something that might end up in somebody's recycling box. And I'll just show you the prints in a bit more close up. And now I'm going to do a similar process on some thicker paper in order to make some tags. When I was doing my practicing, I just used one piece of paper for several prints, and I really like the effect of that because you get the sort of voids that then get filled in with more pattern. So I thought I'd use this technique to make my tags, and I'm using some 200-gram weight cartridge paper because I find that gives you a good. You want your tags to be. You don't want the to be. If you use thinner paper, they're going to sort of roll up, but that weight of paper I find is a really good. It's sort of thin enough that you can still pick up detail because you want to be able to mould the paper around the fern, but it's stiff enough that when you've made it into tags, they stay in shape. And I'm just going to stop. I put a little bit of music on, and you can see how these prints emerged. When this print came out, I felt it still didn't really have enough definition, which is when I regretted not having got a darker colour in the paints I bought. So I thought I'd use some black, but I'm using a printing ink, which again is better for the environment than acrylic because I don't think it has plastic in. See, that's the problem. It's very hard to find exactly the ingredients you get in these paints and inks. But it's a very kind of viscous sort of consistency, so quite different to the paints that I've been using. But you can use it in exactly the same way. It just takes a bit more rolling out. And then I roll it on the plate and make a print in the usual way. These are all the prints that I made in that session, and you can see what sort of interesting textures and colours have emerged. What you'll find, what I find, is that there'll be some areas that you like more than others. Some will be more defined, some might be a little bit blotchy, and that's perfect when you're making tags because you can do something called fussy cutting, which comes from choosing fabric for quilting. You just cut round the bits that you like so you can cherry pick all the best. And I'm going to be using my die cutter to do this. Um, I have this die cutter. I bought it secondhand and it's been really useful. I'll link a video here. It's used in scrapbooking quite a lot. And you do get lots of shapes that are really quite naff, but you can get just sort of simple geometric shapes and snowflakes and really nice shapes as well. You just have to sort of look for them. And in the video, I sort of talk about all the ways that I use a die cutter creatively. And you can also use it as a little printing press. So it's a really useful thing to have. So just as I say, I'm just sort of fussy cutting around the areas of the print that I like best. And I do like this tag shape because it doesn't just cut out the tag and put a hole in it. It puts a little sort of margin of almost like stitches around the edge. But if you don't have a die cutter, of course, with tags, you could just cut them into oblongs. If you wanted to have this slightly more tag shape, you could make a template and cut them round like that. But I must say it's a lot quicker and more fun with a die cutter. And these are some of the tags that I made. And I also made these little foiled fern elements as well. And you can see in my last video how I made those. So I've just got to put them all together to wrap my presents now. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you agree that that's a technique that doesn't take hours to do, but you can get these really effective results that will look absolutely beautiful under the Christmas tree. And I'll put a playlist at the end with other Christmassy kind of things that you might be interested. And I hope you'll join me again soon. And I'll be doing some more after Christmas with kind of the things that you can find in the countryside. Even when the leaves have fallen off the trees, there's still things that you can find to make beautiful art from. So I hope you'll join me then.